Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. In this video, Ruffian and I are competing at Aston in the Novice section. Ruffian felt really relaxed in his warm-up. We did lots of lateral work and we did a lot of changes within the pace, so a bit of medium trot back to working trot and things like that. However, the atmosphere was quite busy, so it was quite difficult to keep his concentration on me and not let his mind get distracted throughout the test. And we actually scored a 34.3 in this test, which I think was scored very fairly because I thought his concentration was just lacking a little bit and he felt a little bit hypersensitive. As you can see in that medium trot, he broke from his contact and went very stiff and tense in his neck and over his back. And then onto our 2-loop serpentine. I actually don't think I did a very good shape, just didn't ride very accurately, so I rushed the last loop into the canter transition, but luckily he picked up the correct leg and stayed quite supple and relaxed throughout the transition, but the actual shape of the serpentine was not the best. And then again onto our medium canter down the long side. I find it really difficult to show really a difference in the canter down a long side on a 20x40 arena on such a big horse, so it's definitely something we need to work on, but I thought his canter had improved from our previous event. And then onto our transition down. As you can see, our transition to walk, he almost felt like he needed to halt, again just being a little bit too sensitive in my aids, so I doubt we scored very well for that movement. And then again in his walk, I found it really difficult to keep him moving forwards. He almost felt like he was just walking on the spot and being a little bit over dramatic with his front legs. And then onto our extended walk. It wasn't a free walk on a long rein, but our extended walk, I actually think he showed some really nice steps throughout it, so I was quite pleased with that. And then just gathering my reins up without getting him to jig jog. He was actually sneezing in this corner, which was a bit distracting for our upwards transition, which you can obviously see he actually canted a little bit. Again, losing marks there. He was just not concentrating and I was a bit distracted with his sneezes. But I was much happier with our second 2-loop serpentine, and his frame was a lot nicer and that upwards transition to canter was really smooth and I was really happy with that. And then again onto our medium canter down the long side. I find it really difficult to ask for an exaggerated medium canter because I have to gather him back again to prepare for downwards transitions in the corner. So again, something to definitely work on. And then our final medium trot before going up the centre line. I was quite pleased with it. It was definitely better than the first one, but he was still a little bit tense. And then just keeping him focused on our final movements. But sadly, I misjudged the centre line, so I went up the centre line a little bit too far out to the right, and he did a lovely square halt, but sadly it was just totally not on the centre line. But I was very, very pleased with him, and I thought the score we got was fair. Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Ruff and I are here at Aston competing in the Novice, and we've just run through our dressage and it didn't go quite to plan. He was a little bit sensitive. It's quite an atmosphere here with some building work getting done on a new arena, and the dressage warm-up being quite busy, but he was a really good boy and quite relaxed. He's not been loose in the car park this week, so that's always a positive, and he's very relaxed here today. In one of our upwards trot transitions, he assumed it was a canter transition, and our medium trot was not great, but I thought our transitions to canter this week was really, really, really good, and our halts were quite not quite on the centre line, but they were quite, when I asked for them, they were quite instant, so that was good. And his canter work improved a lot since Cirencester Park. We've been working quite a lot on that, and we're about to go walk the show jumping. We walked the cross country this morning and the ground's holding up, it's quite wet, so we'll be putting studs in later. But yeah, so far it's been a good day, and fingers crossed for the jumping phases. And on to our show jumping. Sadly, I think we had a little bit too long of a show jumping warm-up, but he warmed up really lovely, and he didn't actually tap a pole in the warm-up, which sometimes I quite like him to do, just so then when he goes into the arena he's a little bit more careful because he's had that pole in the warm-up. Sadly, we had 2 poles in this round, which is very unlike Ruff. I felt he was just really tense and running through my hands the whole time, and I kept wanting to really get him collected. And yes, he just kind of felt a bit grumpy throughout the round. We did all the correct strides between the combinations and things, so I was quite pleased with that. But coming around this corner, he just fights me there, as you can see, and we just have the back rail down off that spread. So afterwards, I'm just trying to really just give him a pull and, you know, collect ourselves back together, which he does really nicely coming down this treble, which I was really pleased with, and he actually stayed quite straight through that, landing on the correct leg coming round to our next couple of fences. But I was just really gutted with our round, as I'd been practicing so much on our show jumping. I've been really working hard towards it, and to have the results that we did, it was just a bit disheartening. But we came round to this spread totally disunited, and fair enough, we got that pole. I definitely could have ridden that better, but I think the nerves just got to me. And we jumped the one-strided double really nicely, and we finished on 8 faults. And then sadly I made the really tough decision to not run Ruffian at all in the cross country, because the ground was not the best condition and we weren't going to be super competitive. So I thought save him for another day, and it's very unusual for him to have 2 poles. So I actually ended up going show jump schooling on grass the following day. We went to Wayfarer and jump schooled on grass, and we practiced trebles and rode a course which was really nicely spaced out for us, so I didn't have to worry too much about strides. I popped the fences up to about 115, 120 as I am preparing for an intermediate novice. Aston was meant to be our practice run before going into our first intermediate novice, but as you can see, this practice show jump school was very beneficial and very educational for both Ruffian and I. I felt I have become really nervous in my show jump riding, hence why just previously you saw Ruffian have a stop at an upright. I just kicked him on for too long of a stride, and he just said, "No mum, there is not one. I'm going to save us both," and very correctly pop a stop in. That is my first ever stop on Ruff in the show jumping. He's always tried to get over the fence for me, so that was quite a surprise, but I was glad he did, you know, save himself and not do a silly stride over quite a large upright. And then we went round and jumped the course a little bit bigger once I'd pulled my socks up and stopped being so nervous, basically. I actually show jumped him in a snaffle, a full cheek snaffle in a Micklem bridle. I took it all the way back to basics because I thought the combination bit that I usually show jump him in at competitions, I felt he was just a bit angry with it and was fighting it and sort of set his neck against my contact instead of accepting it. But at home I actually jump Ruffian in a snaffle and he goes really nicely in it, so I thought take him out on grass and give it a go. It's just at competitions he's a lot more lively and he's a big old horse for me to try and just keep contained and balanced around big fences. But I felt after this show jump school that I sort of need a middle bit, a bit of an in-between bit, not quite just a snaffle, something a little bit more. But I finished on jumping this treble, which was set at about 120, and he jumped through that really well. I've actually made our way to Wayfarer eventing to do some show jump practice, as sadly our event yesterday at Aston, the rules didn't quite go to plan. We got a 34-point-something dressage, which was a very fair score. I thought it was a fair dressage mark. And then show jumping, we hit 2 poles, which was a little bit unlike him. He's usually either just the 1 pole or he usually jumps clear. And so I decided not to run him in the cross country because the ground was quite deep and boggy. Aston tried hard to get the ground as good as they could, but we weren't going to be competitive in our section, so I decided just to not run him. So today we came out to do some show jump practice on grass, just to practice on everything that needs work on. He jumped really well. I think my confidence is lacking a bit in the show jumping because I find it so costly in the actual event, and that kind of messes my mind up, so I feel like I can't see a stride when I'm jumping. He was really good today. He jumped probably 115, 120 because I'm aiming for an intermediate novice next Monday. settle down, so I'm hoping that we've got a little bit more practice in us after our show jumping today, and I'm hoping that it runs smoothly. I'm working really hard on my show jumping because it's definitely my weakest phase. Ruff's actually quite good at the show jumping, but I think he can feel me being nervous and he just gets a bit anxious about that. I think we're going to try a different bit. Today I jumped in a snaffle, which wasn't quite enough, and usually I jump him in a combination bit, but I felt he was just a little bit too tense in that and couldn't relax in his neck, so I'm going to try something in between. But he's been a really good boy today, and yeah, just relaxing with his ice boots on, checking his legs are okay, and yeah, looking forward to the next event. But thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.